So sorry for the delay and hello, great, good evening. Let's hope it turns out to be great. So sorry for the delay because commuting in the city is actually tough. So mostly people are late by a few minutes. So hello Sahana. So we take off.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here, and especially today being Pathan Day. YRF is selling the tickets for 110 rupees, I think, today, everywhere. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor.
My pleasure, because it's very important to hear what poets and writers have to say and not say. So foremost, let me start with the basics. That we've always heard that poets are born. They're not. You can't become. I can't become a poet. I mean, I have to be having that in me. But do you agree with this?
Not really. I'll remind you of that evening at IHC. Only remember Mathrubhumi Awards.
Yeah,
it was being
5 years back.
Yes. And I was at a table with you and Ritya Garg and Dr. A.J. Thomas. Dr. A.J. Thomas, for those who don't know, he was the chief editor for Indian Literature, which is the Journal of Sahitya Akademi. So he's the one who told me that, Sahana, why don't you write for us and send me 3 poems. And I was terrified because I did not think that I had it in me to write poetry. I had written a book already, fiction. So no, I did not think that I was born to be a poet. So that's one instance where I kind of explored the genre of poetry. And before that, at one creative writing workshop, Professor Amit Chaudhary, who happens to be a literary critic who's very hard to please, he read a couple of my flash fiction pieces, and he said, Sahana, your prose reads like poetry. And I did not know what that meant, but later I understood that what he meant was that there was a musicality to the sentences, and probably there was like a rhythm, tuck, tuck, tuck. So when I was forced to write poetry,
It is all in the last 4-5 years.
Yes, 2020 I published my first poem, and it was, I've told you this, it was inspired by our taxi ride back to Gurgaon.
Yeah.
So when
We shared the taxi. This is before Corona.
Yes, it was the first time we had met. Yes,
yeah.
and we both discovered that we are going to the same, kind of in the same direction. So we took an Uber and we got talking, and I was inspired to write something called My Taxi is a Sleeper Cell. This was, I wrote for Dr. A.J. Thomas, but then I never sent it to him. But that's when I felt that yes, maybe I have the skill sets to write poetry as well.
So this brings me to ask you that why don't you, or how do we demolish this notion that you're born poet, then only you can write? Because a lot of young people, or even not so young, would take to poetry. It's a healer actually, because a lot of people take to fiction writing and other forms of writing more for unleashing their thoughts or sentiments. So why not poetry? So how to demolish this age-old thing that you're born poet, otherwise you can't write? How to do it?
I have 2 perspectives here. One is that I always felt that you have to earn the label of being a poet. That poets are very special people. You just can't simply wake up one day and say I'm a poet. And secondly, in fact, I just wrote an opinion piece for Times of India where the topic I was given was how to keep poetry alive in the age of Instagram stories. So I explored a lot of how social media helps in creating poets, and it also helps in reaching out to a greater audience, but there is also a downside to instant gratification where you post something on Facebook, you get 100 likes and everybody thinks, oh, I've arrived. But yes, I haven't really disclosed this, but before I turned to writing professionally, I used to write a lot of haiku.
Okay.
And the first haiku was inspired by something that enraged me. So I have discovered that I write poetry when I'm really angry or really, really sad. So that is where my poetry stems from. So yes, I was writing a lot of Japanese short forms where you have to count syllables in English, at least in the most basic form of writing haiku, senryu. A haiku, if you are aware, is short, a three-line poem which talks about seasons and nature. And if the same format is used for the human condition, for what's happening around us, etc., so it's called a senryu. So I used to write a lot of those without being aware of the different, forms available for us to write. And what that did was, it trained my mind to write in 17 syllables. So even in my book, there are lots of sentences without me being conscious of the fact. If you count the syllables, it all adds up to 17.
But then isn't that a little strain on the head?
No. It's almost like, okay, yesterday I was with a beauty therapist and I asked her, do you keep an alarm with you while you're doing a face massage? She said, no, I've been doing this for 8-9 years and now I know it automatically that, okay, this stage is over, I have to go to the next stage. So it's almost like that.
I think the other notion about poets is that, they're offbeat. I don't want to use any harsh word, but they're moody, they can be forlorn, they can be, breaking the set norm. So, like you said, you write when you're angry or upset. So, how far is that true? Because
that I'll have to ask the people around me.
No, but do you consider yourself to be not following the middle path? I mean, in the sense that you have your own
Yes,
lifestyle.
I do go into a zone, and then my husband and my daughter, they know not to disturb me. So when I was writing my book also, Combat Skirts, I had a room of my own, very lucky to have that. And there were days on end when I did not go out of my room. Somebody used to bring my food on a tray. So one day I came out of the room and I was, in the living room, and my husband Shakil, he said, "Do you know what has happened?" I said, "No, tell me what." He said, "Your kurta at the back is completely torn. Did you realize?" And I didn't. So it's almost like a meditative thing where you completely are lost and you go into a zone.
Poetry doesn't sell. So either you have something on the side, a profession that can feed you, or you can die of starvation. Earlier, poets actually had nothing to eat.
No, earlier actually poets had patrons. Now that is kind of missing. So yes, poetry doesn't sell, but it also gives you a greater platform to voice what you really want to say. The anthology of peace poetry that I've just edited, it's called Amity, and it's a collection of peace poetry. I did not give any set, I did not have too much of a demand from my contributing poets. I just said, whatever feels like peace to you, just send me. So they have interpreted peace in so many different ways. But the thing is, when I proposed this to the publisher, they said yes immediately because they saw some merit in the theme. But at the same time, they said, who's going to buy a book about peace poetry? But when this released on December 12th, it was on Amazon best-selling lists immediately, and so many people have started speaking about what peace means to them. So if we see the value of poetry in creating a dialogue, then I think
It's worth it.
it is worth it, definitely worth it.
Earlier we had this progressive writers forum, other forums, when people were really charged, so they came together, whether from south or north. But there's nothing today of that sort. It doesn't become fashionable. I'm a writer, you're a poet, we'll sit in our own little cozy corners and we'll speak when we want to, that also on very safe subjects. We'll not dare veto whatever is happening. Just comment on this.
Yes, so there are lots of festivals everywhere. Every day there are 4 or 5 events that are going on, but at the same time I do not see a common platform or a unity in the voices of the poets, and this is something that has been discussed in different poetry festivals as well. There is a lot of competition and commercialization of poetry, and when this happens, a lot of people are just writing for effect, because poetry is something, if you're writing free verse, for example, how do you even know the quality of a poem? So it's become very easy for people. I've seen people who cannot write prose, but they are very, they're established poets. So poetry does give you the freedom to just write whatever you want, but at the same time, it's also spoiled writers, where I see, this is my perspective, that they have stopped working on their craft, and it's become very easy to just be a part of an anthology. You just send a poem to someone you know, and it's become a very, there are cliques, and if you know the right people, you will be constantly published. That does not say anything about the quality of your work as a poet. So in India right now, the poets who are actually doing well and the ones who I admire are the ones who are writing for international journals, where the acceptance rate is as low as 0.5%. So if you can crack those journals, then you know really that yes, you are in trend, you are writing on themes that are experimental. You're breaking norms, you're trying to push the limits of the boundaries of what language can do. For example, shape poems, where a poem is on page, it appears as a shape. It can be a building, an animal, a bird. It is not welcome by publishers in India because it creates problems in,
Design and all.
Yes, design and
Publishing.
yes, typesetting. So these are small limitations and considerations which I feel can easily be overcome, and they should be more open. Very well-known poets, I'm not going to take names, but they are very also territorial about what poetry means. They are not open to experiments.
So how did you think of this anthology? I mean, what triggered off?
So is Shakil here? He's not. So in September, and this was 5th September, I remember.
2022.
Yes, 2022. We were just having breakfast, and he said that something happened. There was a trigger on Twitter, and I did not react the way usually, people would react. Microaggression, so much Islamophobia on Twitter. So he said that, you always react so positively to even negative situations. So why not collect stories of people who do the same? And without thinking, I just picked up the phone and I called the publisher, Kirti Singh Gupta, managing director of Havakol, and I said, Kirti da, can we make a book about peace? And he said, yes, Sahana, but you will have to edit the book. So he put the whole responsibility back on me. I said, fine, I'll do that. And the same day I composed a call for submissions, and within a month and a half, all the material for the book was ready. Post that, we were looking for forewords and endorsements from important people. So that took some time. But then we were also working towards a deadline, which was December 29th. I knew that there was a Women Economic Forum happening in Delhi. global event, and Nobel Peace Laureate Winnie Bushamawi. She's someone I work with. She was going to be there, and I had asked her to launch the book. So she had agreed, and we had a deadline that we have to produce the book by December 29th. And Kiriti and Havakal and their whole team were very, very, yes, supportive.
But do you think it's time, or in fact ripe enough time, that we restart the progressive writers movement, where there were poets, writers? It was started, I mean, the first chairperson was Premchand, Munshi Premchand. So there was no language barrier, there was no regional stuff, because there's so much happening. And you know, a lot of people are writing, but that force, the push, or the little command that a writer or a group of writers could take on is not there. And how does one go
I wish that could be done, but like I said, there's a lot of many considerations which are not exactly literary or in the interest of coming together as writers. So there are very few people who are actually creating opportunities for other writers to speak.
To come.
Yes, so that's happening also with the advent of social media. Everybody wants the spotlight to be on them. I think it's one of the challenges towards trying to achieve what you are suggesting.
What about the translation part? Suppose I'm a Hindi writer and I'm staying I'm residing in a small town or village or kasbah, then I'll die I mean, nobody will read me. What do you say?
That was happening till a couple of years ago. Then the Commonwealth Foundation, they started different awards for translations as well. So ever since there's been translations and translators have become popular. And a lot of, like JLF, they have an entire section for regional writers. And also a lot of people on Twitter I see are working towards giving translators a bigger platform. Because usually what happens is the author is the one who gets all the limelight and the translators are not even. So with this new kind of trend, what we see is that not only are regional stories becoming more mainstream, but also translators are getting a lot of recognition.
Suppose you write a poem today and you get it published, then after that, do you feel you've done your bit, or there's a lot of vacuum inside you? I mean, do you still feel sad that, okay, I've done my bit yet?
So, like I said, I usually write when there is something very, very emotional, yes, intensity inside me which needs an outlet. For example, last year when the Sully deals and Gulibai, all of that was happening, and initially I wasn't even aware that something like this was happening, but then I saw some of my friends being on that list, and when I read up about what was happening, it just disturbed me so badly that I could not sleep that night, and I think at 2 or 2:30 I opened my